All right, we're doing stuff a little different today. So I'm going to teach on Mark a little bit, and then we'll do Torah processional here soon. Specifically, I'm going to speak, if you want to go to the first slide, I'm going to speak on Mark 15, verses 16 through 39. You guys can open to that if you want. We'll get to it here soon after I give a little context. I decided to title this Crucifixion as Coronation, and I think as we go through this, you'll see why. You can go ahead and go to the next slide. So some resources. Years ago, I heard a Messianic Jew, Marty Solomon, teach a little bit on this. He kind of was the first one to bring it to my awareness, and he learned it from his rabbi, Ray Vander Laan. And Ray Vander Laan learned from a scholar named Thomas Schmidt, who wrote an article in a scholarly journal. And N.T. Wright, kind of one of the preeminent scholars of our time, that a lot of the Messianic teachers that I listen to read a lot of his work. And he wrote a book called When God Became King, and he kind of touches on this as well, just with the different gospels and their agenda for telling the story of Messiah. And as I was trying to research for this topic, I typed in crucifixion as coronation because that's what seemed the most appropriate to me. And I ended up stumbling across a teaching by a ministry called Fig Tree Ministries. Now, I don't really know much about this ministry, but I did listen to their teaching on it, and it's very, very good. I recommend it. It's a two-part series. Much of what I'm going to say today is kind of a summarization of kind of a lot of what they said and what's in the article from Thomas Schmidt. You can go you can go skip slide 3 and go to slide 4. It'll be fine, thank you. So there's 9 steps of a Roman triumphal procession. Now, what's a triumph? A triumph is back in the day, early Roman period, whenever they'd have these big battles and wars and stuff, then the general would come back and they would have this ceremonial procession of like a victory one. And it was reserved for basically the warlords like Pompey and stuff like that, and eventually became associated with the Caesars and became the coronation ceremony, as well as kind of different kind of victory ceremonies. And there were 9 specific steps that this Thomas Schmidt was able to kind of see that were fairly consistent in all these triumphal processions. And one example, a modern day example of what we might think of is maybe like an inauguration in Washington, D.C. There's an order to it. There's a procession. The president comes, he swears, he's in front of the different people, he's at the Capitol Hill, all this kind of stuff. So it's very ordered. And ironically, maybe not ironically, maybe it's divine appointment, we're having a Torah procession today, and there's an order to it, and there's this deep custom and ritual and meaning behind all of it. And it's similar with this Roman triumph procession. So we can go to the next slide. So the first step of a Roman triumph is that it's going to start at the Praetorium. There's be a gathering of Praetorian Guard. The Praetorian Guard were kind of like the secret service of Caesar, or maybe just the trusted soldiers and maybe the most qualified. That's going to start out with them at their headquarters and then go from there. We can go to the next slide. So step number 2, there's ceremonial dress. So the Caesar wouldn't always wear purple, but on this occasion he would wear purple, and he would have a crown on his head rather than maybe the olive leaves or whatever. Historically, this kind of came down from the Grecians, the Dionysus worship. Step 3 is that they begin a procession. So they would begin to walk through a certain area of Rome, and all the while, it'd be the sacred way, or via sacra, and they would bring a bull. The bull is eventually going to be sacrificed when they get where they're going. Go to the next slide. So step 4, there would be an official there who was going to carry the instrument of death. So there'd be somebody that would come with a double-bladed axe that's eventually going to be used for the sacrificial victim, in this case, a bull. And then step number 5 is they would reach Capitoline Hill. Now, tradition says when they founded Rome, there's 7 hills in Rome, and when they founded Rome, they were supposedly digging on this hill, and they found a severed head, and so they named it Caput in Latin, means head, and they named it Capitoline Hill. And this is where they put the temple to Jupiter, which is kind of their king of gods, kind of like the Roman version of Zeus, I believe. And this is where the procession would come and end. This is where the rest of the ceremony is going to take place. You go to the next slide. So number 6, there would be myrrhed wine. It's a very special wine that would be reserved for the very wealthy or perhaps the royal. But he would refuse it because this represents kind of like the finest things in life. But right now, it's not the time, and he pours it out. And it's going to be representative of the blood of the sacrifice. And step 7, the Caesar is going to be elevated. He's going to have 2 prominent members, maybe the head of the Senate on one side, and there'd be important figures on each side of him. Okay, the next slide. So number 8, they would have the crowd, and the crowd is proclaiming, "Hail Caesar, Lord and God." And step number 9 is there would seem to always be some kind of omen or some kind of sign of the affirmation or favor from the gods. In this specific example of Nero's coronation, there was like a flock of doves that flew to the east and then a flock of doves that flew to the west. And this was kind of like heaven and earth are in agreement that this is confirmed by the gods that this Nero is the Son of God or King. So these are the examples or the steps of a traditional triumph. And these 9 steps were found in pretty much all the different triumphs. You can go to the next slide. And for us today, we're going to talk about Messiah and how this kind of all relates. And we're kind of shown a question in Mark, at the early part of Mark 15. Pilate, a Roman, is there, and he interrogates Yeshua and says, "Are you the king of the Jews?" And Yeshua answers, "As you say." And the ruling Kohanim, or priests, began to accuse him of many things. Again, Pilate asked him, "Aren't you going to answer? Look how many charges they're bringing against you." But Yeshua did not answer. So Pilate was amazed. So we're left with this question and kind of a begging for an investigation. And so Mark wisely doesn't allow us to have a defined answer yet, but we're going to see in this next section that I read, I'm going to start to connect the dots. You've probably already connected most of the dots, which is good. But I'll read through. You can go to the next slide. I'm going to read Mark 15, 16 through 39, and with the backstory I've given you, I think you're going to see the connections here. But I'll go through it. "And the soldiers led him away into the court, which is the praetorium. And they called together the entire company of soldiers and decked him with purple, and they plaited a crown of thorns and put it on him. And they began to call out to him, 'Greetings, King of the Jews.' And they kept beating him on the head with a reed and were spitting on him. And bending the knee, they were bowing down to him. And when they had mocked him, they took the purple off of him and put on his own garments on him and led him out to crucify him. And they compelled the passerby, Simon, the Cyrenian, coming from the field, the father of Alexander and Rufus, to bear his cross. And they brought him to the place, Golgotha, which is translated, place of the skull. And they were giving him wine mixed with myrrh to drink, but he did not take it. And when they crucified him, they divided his garments, casting lots for them, what each one should take. And it was the 3rd hour, and they crucified him. And the inscription of his accusation was written above him, 'The King of the Jews.' And with him they impaled 2 revolutionaries, one on his right and the other on his left. And the scripture was filled, that says, 'And he was reckoned with the lawless.' And those passing by were blaspheming him, shaking their heads and saying, "Ah, you who destroy the dwelling place and build it in 3 days, save yourself, come down from the stake." And likewise the chief priests and scribes, mocking to one another, said, "He saved others. Is he unable to save himself? The Messiah, the King of Israel, come down now from the cross, so that we see and believe." And those who were crucified with him were reproaching him. And when the 6th hour came, darkness came over all the land until the 9th hour. And at the 9th hour, Yeshua cried out with a loud voice, saying, "Ali, Ali, lama sabachthani," which is translated, my God, why have you forsaken me?" And some of those standing by, when they heard it, said, "See, he is calling for Eliyahu." And someone ran and filled a sponge with sour wine and put it on a reed and offered it to him to drink, saying, "Leave him, let us see if Eliyahu does come to take him down." And Yeshua cried out with a loud voice and breathed his last. And the veil of the dwelling place was torn in two from top to bottom. And when the centurion, who was standing opposite him, saw that, he cried out like this and breathed his last. He said, "Truly this man was the Son of God." Okay, you can go to the next slide. So I imagine you saw most of the stuff. This is a quick rundown of all the parallels. So it started off in the Praetorium, which was unusual to have that many guards for one guy. And then it has the ceremonial dress of the purple robe. Matthew says it was a red robe. I submit to you that Mark's agenda is that he's trying to get you to see the parallels. So whether it was purple or red, I do not know, but each gospel writer has an agenda. The people were saying, "Hail, King of the Jews." Then there was a procession, but this was not a procession that was going to be a lot of praise and all that. This was going to be kind of an anti-procession of a lot of mockery and spitting and all that. And it's going to be the way of suffering. Step 4, you have Simon the Cyrenian. He takes the execution weapon, the cross. And then seemingly of not much importance, it tells us who his sons are. However, in kind of full circle for Mark and his agenda, which I think his agenda is to write to a Roman audience, we find in Paul's letter to the Romans, he mentions Rufus. So there's a Rufus that lives in Rome that would have been reading this letter from Paul. But theoretically, when they read this Gospel of Mark in Rome, they see, wow, Rufus's father. Oh, I can talk to Rufus about his father carried the cross. And it comes full circle to this kind of audience. Very interesting. And you can go to the next slide. We have step 5, Capitoline Hill. Not coincidentally, we have Golgotha, which I didn't want to go through the long process of trying to prove the point, but you can actually make the case that instead of skull, it could be head. So it could be an exact thing of place of the head, or hill, head hill. And then step 6, he had the myrrh wine. Step 7, he had 2 revolutionaries on each side of him. Step 8, he has all those that are, rather than calling him king, and I guess they were calling him king, but in a mocking way, and they were insulting him. And it shows kind of an anti-triumph, an opposite form. In step 9, we have earthquake, we've got darkness, we've got torn veil, we've got heaven and earth confirming this coronation of our suffering King Messiah. And we can go to the next slide. So I think we are answered the question of, is he the king? And this pattern that Mark shows, I think he is showing us that he is in fact Lord and King. Much like Psalm 24:10, where it says, "Who is the King of glory?" It's Yahweh of armies. He is the King of glory. And then you go to the final slide. And his kingdom is not like the kingdom of this world. So when Caesar is getting coronated, when he's going through this triumph, they're celebrating victory, dominion, defeat of the enemies, celebrating power and wealth. all these kind of things. When Messiah is being coronated, it's quite the opposite. It's a way of suffering, ridicule, slander. He's betrayed. He was abandoned, spit upon, falsely accused, tortured, shamed beyond anything that we could possibly understand. All the while, he does it without fighting, without defending himself. In fact, he forgives those that do this to him. It's quite contrary to the ways of this world and to the empire of Rome. We have this new kingdom that is the opposite of everything that our natural world wants to promote. And it's quite a beautiful thing. And that's the way of our King. So I will close with that. We are going to have a time of greeting at this time. Don't dismiss the kids, but we're going to have a time of greeting, and then we'll continue on with the service.